I've got a link at the bottom of this video where you can check out what I'm going to talk about right now. But generally speaking, I'm going to go over some of the insider notes that we picked up in the last 24 hours about Georgia scrimmage. And this was published over on Dog Post 12 hours ago at midnight. And I think the big thing that's coming out, and even Kirby talked about this after the practice, was there's this perception, I think, and there's a reality that the defense did not do as well as the offense, and I think that is true. But I think we also have to have context by which we're making that statement. And in the article, it's about a 1,500 word article. Um, it talks about this and how you know there was a there were times in the scrimmage where Stetson had a lot of time to throw, and because there is concern about the defense, folks are immediately saying, well, the defense, the front seven, is I don't want to say a problem. I wouldn't go that far. But with the folks that I talk to and trust, there is an acknowledgement that the defense is not as good as it was last year right now, that it's not as big as it was. Um, there are some mixed reviews on the speed of the defense. Some people think they're plenty fast enough. Some people kind of felt like you can tell they're not as fast. But there are a couple of people I talk to that I really trust and have trusted for a long time, years. And their view is that the defense is just going to need some time. They also, and I write about this in the story, um, talk about you can't just say, hey, it was a bad day without the context, which was Jalen Carter didn't play a ton. That there were times where the defense wasn't getting pressure, but they were dropping eight. So I think Georgia fans have always really been good at freaking out, and that's sort of what they do. And I went to the article that we wrote a year ago for this scrimmage with the context that that team won the national championship. They won the national championship. This moment existed, and read that article. And Kirby was more positive that day than he was yesterday. But the overall negativity surrounding the scrimmage, I remember it. It was pretty serious. Now, the defense completely dominated that scrimmage a year ago. The way the offense dominated this one. But in that scrimmage, there were players that were out on the offensive side of the ball. Um, and of course, we didn't know that Stetson Bennett would become the quarterback that started at Georgia either. So this is a snapshot. It is just a picture of where Georgia's at. It is not the entire season. There will be players that progress over time. I mean, if you were to say at the beginning of 21 that A.D. Mitchell would make some of the most important catches in the season, people would say they didn't have a very good year. Well, they went 14-1 and won the national championship. So it's important to keep things in context. It's also important to remind y'all uh, we're done stuffing these envelopes towards our annual subscribers. Any annual subscriber to Dog Post is getting these free. Some of them are already in the mail. I can't overwhelm the post office, and so I take it easy on them. But pick up DAWGSTRUCTION today, and you get our 2022 preview for free while supplies last, and they're not lasting. So there's going to be some at Red Zone on Clayton in Athens. Mindy and Scott will be there to help you. They got a very good staff. There's a bunch of other really cool stuff in there. But pick up DAWGSTRUCTION today. It's a great keepsake, and I know that you're going to want to read it if you've not read it yet. It's not just pictures. There's some stories in here that, well, they've not been written online anywhere. Obviously, Jeff Foxworthy with the forward. So consider that. The link is down below too. But I think when having done this for such a long time now, number one, okay, so the tight ends are the best group, but the offensive line is probably the second best group, and I'm not sure that they're so far apart that you can really tell. Tate Ratliff, well, you can tell. The tight ends are better, but they're astronomically good. This offensive line, people are really, 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 really excited about them, and I don't know if Tate Ratledge is going to start or not. He's going to play. My guess is that he will start some. Anyway, he wasn't out there yesterday. Kendall Milton was not out there for the offense. But I want to focus on this offensive line for a second because it could be a special offensive line. And once you start adding the pieces, I'm starting to get visions of an extremely good offense because they're going to be able to push people around on the offensive side of the ball. The people who were at the scrimmage conveyed that the offensive line looked very good. Broderick Jones was mentioned more than once, but it's not just Broderick, right? This line is deep, it is big, and extremely athletic. Um, they certainly are going to make a run at the best offensive line in the country, and I think that if that's the case, there's no one way to win a national championship. The way that Nick won them at Alabama 10 years ago is not the way that he won it in 2020. And, the way that LSU won the national championship in '03 with Nick or '07 with Les Miles, which were defensive dominated teams, generally speaking, they flipped the switch and totally went offensive. They had the best quarterback of this century so far, Joe Burrow, on their team. Yeah, I said it. Prove me wrong. Um, I, you can win in any number of ways. It is possible that this offensive line, coupled with the 6 years of experience of Stetson Bennett, I'll get to him in a second, but his experience. But I think the key to this is getting Kendall Milton healthy to the starting line and injury free for 15 games. I think if those three things combine, Georgia will play for the national championship again. But I think those three things got to happen for Georgia to really have a chance to win it. Alabama right now is having a hard time finding themselves on the offensive line. That's what the problem was a season ago in the spring. So they've added Jermaine Burton. They've added the running back from Georgia Tech. They've added skill guys. But if you don't have the ability to block and execute on offense, on the offensive line specifically, it's hard to move the ball. It's hard to score. Um, Other thing that folks there is now listen there people are concerned because the defense doesn't look like it did a year ago, but the calmer voices are saying, hey, that is true, but let's just see where they're at in game 6. Now if you lose a game between Florida, I guess, then there is no margin for error. But y'all, there's not a lot of games these guys can lose. There's not, and it's tricky playing Auburn, but that game's in Athens. They're a 17-point favorite against Oregon. They should not lose that game. And then you've got South Carolina. They don't have the guys to play with Georgia. I mean, it's in Columbia, and that week I'm going to talk about that being a tough game, and that's going to be true. But they should not lose these games, okay? Honestly, there's not a game they should lose in the regular season. But by the time they get to the crunch of their year, which is going to be back-to-back Gators in Tennessee, then Mississippi State and Kentucky, I mean, there's plenty of areas to lose a game right there, but your defense has got to get where it's going by that time. You can lose to Oregon and move forward. A year ago when Georgia was getting ready for Clemson, everybody was like, these teams can lose and get to the playoffs. No, that's bullshit. you have to win these openers. Okay, um, they set the tone for the season. Georgia's not going to lose to Oregon and really expect that there's not problems on the team. All right. So I fully expect them to beat Oregon. The problems that Oregon's got are not solved in a 9 month period. You're switching quarterbacks, coaches. It's asking a lot for them to come across the country at the Dome and win a game against Georgia. If they lose that game, it's on Kirby. That's it. But they're not. I mean, that it's hard to see that happening right now. But I think what we're wanting to see here is the first quarter of that game. Like if I could just watch the first quarter of that game, I could tell you who's going to win. The only two games that I've missed on that one, are the Alabama games. I mean, if you looked at the first quarter of the championship game, you'd say Georgia's going to win this game running away. If you look at the first quarter of the national championship game, you think Alabama's going to, neither team looked good in Indianapolis in the first half, but you think Alabama was the better team. That's why they play 60 minutes. So I think to me, there's different ways to win. And whereas Georgia folks are not comfortable with that, they tried to embrace it with Eric Zier. Um, that's not their brand. So it's going to be hard to switch from Coke to Coke Zero, and that I think is the part that people are going to have to understand is the strength of this team is the offense, period. I think the special teams were a bit jumpy yesterday. We'll see how that moves on as we get closer to the season. But my thing on this is, I've been saying this since we saw them, in the first practice on the 4th, I think it was. They're not as big on defense. They don't look as good on defense. They don't. The thing that is concerning is that what Kirby described after the scrimmage, they're gonna have to really fight in this second scrimmage with the offense. The offense is better than them. They just are. Let's see what the defense comes back with. I want to see the defense go right at the offense and try to whip their ass. If you get that, this team's on their way. If it's that Kirby comes back and says we're still not fighting or whatever the words he wants to use, they got a ways to go if that's the case. Make sure you're clicking on their article. It's a premium article, but it's well worth the time and money.